So we heard the Minister giving us the platform for our forthcoming panel discussion. We will have remarks from our fellow panelists here, and then I would like to take it up to you for your potential questions. We had a great approach from the Minister. Inuuteq, you have a variety of a background. You've been in the DC and now you're the head of the mission of Greenland to the EU. So what's your approach on the developments of the relation of Greenland within EU and towards EU? How do you see that going forward?
Well, I think to start with, I think the take from the Minister's introductory speech is that we've been able to adapt, I think, our relations with the EU over the years, and I think especially in these times that we live in, it's even more important, that we're able to adapt, and our aim, has always been because of the long-standing relations and cooperation that we have had with the EU, that we see, we see the EU as a natural partner for Greenland. Also because, our trade relations are quite extensive, our economic relations as well, and the EU engagement, has been very constructive, especially as the ministers, alluded to the education sector, that we're now widening to the green growth sectors. And we're very glad, that the Commission announced that they're going to open up an office here, because I think direct relations, being able to talk directly with each other, only, I think, facilitates even greater relations. So that's, I think, my take from what has happened and what is happening now, between Greenland and the EU.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. You're EU Special Envoy on the Arctic affairs, and we heard the Minister also touching upon the EU's quite recent Arctic strategy, whereas Russia's aggressions really wiped away, for instance, the Northern Dimension collaboration at once. So how do you see that, and what are your views on potential renewal of the EU's Arctic strategy, and especially in terms of the relations to Greenland?
Thanks very much, Tero. And can I congratulate the Minister on an excellent speech? I mean, she really summed up perfectly the state of our relations, and it's made my job easier because I don't have to do it myself now. So, we have a policy that dates back from October last year. It was a result of a lot of work. It was very much building on previous policies, but the main sort of priorities remain the same. It's about climate protection, climate change, climate action, environmental protection. It's about trying to create green jobs, and that's where the relationship with Greenland is particularly significant, I think. And also trying to enhance international cooperation. Now, obviously, what's happened with the Russian invasion of Ukraine has sort of thrown up many questions, and it's really caused a major interruption to Arctic cooperation. But there is not going to be a revision of our Arctic policy document. I mean, the way we see it is this document is there. It was the state of affairs in October last year, but it's supposed to be a living policy. So we have the tools in that policy document which we can build on and we can use in developing our relationships. And I think what I would say is that obviously we are now excluding Russia from Arctic cooperation. But that doesn't mean that the problems facing the Arctic have gone away. It actually makes it much more imperative that we work more closely together and more urgently with like-minded partners. So I was pleased to see that the Arctic Council, the other members of the Arctic Council have kicked off the work again. We in the European Union, we have our own programs, research programs, regional development programs, science, space. We have a huge amount of activities in the Arctic, and that we can do. We've had to slightly change the terms of reference in some to exclude where there was Russian involvement, but we see the policy we have as a really good basis for continuing the work and intensifying the work, actually also with our friends across the Atlantic. Just to touch on the Greenland relationship briefly, obviously, as the Minister said, we're opening an office. It should be officially opened hopefully early next year. We're just in the process of putting together the logistics and finding the staff. But it's so important to be here on the ground so we can actually talk directly with people. We've had this discussion before during the last couple of days that you can actually properly interact and discuss future cooperation and maybe broadening that cooperation. Talking of the green shift, we are very, very keen on encouraging development of mining for critical minerals, and we see Greenland as a very potential major source of that, and we would like to encourage European investment there. And also, for the first time, we send about 30 million euros to Greenland every year to help with the education sector, but we've hived off in agreement with the Greenlanders 10% of that for specific green growth projects. So we see that as a very useful potential growth area as well. And Greenland has such a potentially major role to play in this green transition. I know time is short, so I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Tom, you're a member of the European Parliament coming from Belgium. Not an Arctic country, but a country with some Arctic research. So how are these things looked there in the Parliament? What type of discussions you and your colleagues have in terms of the Arctic developments, and especially our colleagues here in Greenland?
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me here as well. I greatly enjoy being in Greenland for the second time as a Foreign Affairs Committee member. We were here last year as well with a delegation to exactly shape up, I would say, our very ambitious resolution on Arctic challenges. I think what we tend to say in the Foreign Affairs Committee is that we want more EU in the Arctic and more Arctic in the EU. And I think there is a good perspective for having more EU in the Arctic, not only because of the office opening, because of the renewed partnership agreements, the fisheries agreement, the fact that we're going to have to go through a green transition for which Greenland can really be a great partner in terms of what the Special Envoy just said. But I think the work is to be done on the side of getting more Arctic in the EU. The member state awareness on Arctic affairs is still very, perhaps not limited, but at least scattered. And I think we have a responsibility towards the Arctic, towards Greenland in particular. If we are polluting this part of the world, we have to take responsibility as well to act upon it. So what I would like to see is that the joint communication on the Arctic strategy in fact becomes an adoption or becomes a European Council subject, and that really conclusions can be adopted on that matter so that there is support among member states for the Arctic strategy. That is one remark. Second remark is on security. I think if we have increasing commercial interests here, increasing political interests here, we need to be able to secure or at least contribute to securing those interests. And so far, we haven't really had a proper debate inside the European Union on how to defend these interests. I really would like to see in the future such a debate taking place. Obviously, there are important values that we want to keep in mind for that. It has to be based on transparency and predictability, as it has always been. It has to be based on peaceful international cooperation with non-EU Arctic states, and it has to be based on the principle that this part of the world is a low-tension area and that we want to keep it that way. But if other major power blocks in the world are adopting military strategies in which the Arctic has its spot, then we have to at least make a same or a similar reflection exercise just to be sure that we're ready for it. We have seen with Ukraine that we need to be ready and be prepared for any possible events, unfortunately.
Yeah, indeed, you're very right, and we have seen Finland and Sweden putting in the NATO application as Arctic countries and EU countries as well. European Defence Agency, one of the active partners on this area as well. So let's open the dialogue to the audience, please. We've heard the introductory remarks from each of the panelists, and now the floor is open to you. We have microphones in the room, ready and available. Please come up with your questions, and when you come up with the question, please introduce yourself. There we are. Mats, please. In the front row, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Mats, and I'm the director of the Arctic Economic Council. And my question is to Inuuteq about the funding for green growth that is a part of the partnership agreement. The Greenlandic government came up with a budget last week, and it says that the money for the green growth is not even in the budget because they don't know when they will be transferred. What is holding up this process of transferring this money that will help with the green growth, will help with hydrogen and so on? Why are they not in the budget yet for the 7 years period? Thank you.
There's a, I think, simple and logical explanation is that, you know, in order to receive the funding, you know, you have to do some preparatory work. You know, I won't bore you with all the details about, you know, the whole process, but, you know, you have to adopt a strategy, you have to, you know, set goals and indicators, and you have to, you know, come to terms with the EU Commission, you know, before it is approved. So there's a whole kind of a process related to getting those funds. But I mean, they will get. I mean, the allocation of the 225 million is from 21 to 27, and that's, you know, pretty much kind of a secure. So I mean, they will, you know. So we're not talking about, you know, extra funding, but they will get to Greenland eventually, you know, once all these preparatory works, you know, have been completed.
Thank you very much. A great question and good answer. So further questions from the audience, please. The floor is open. Okay, let me then put another question. Obviously, there's been a great interest in terms of economic developments from our colleagues in China. And there's also been certain developments in Asia which are intensifying the pressure, and that might also have a spillover to the Arctic areas. So let's start with Inuuteq. What is your economic approach in terms of the Chinese developments here in this area, and how's that perhaps then further overlooked or looked in Europe? But let's start with Inuuteq, with you.
In terms of our relationship with China, it's very much trade-based. You know, we have a significant export of fish products to China, and we open up a representation there to look after our interests there. So that's, I mean, our main kind of interest when it comes to Greenland-China relations. But at the same time, I mean, I think we are all aware and have become aware, you know, especially in recent years, about the pitfalls of, you know, and China's activities in the rest of the world. But that's, I think, if you don't want to see, you know, Chinese investments here, then you also have an, I think, obligation as an international community, or, you know, or bilaterally to, I think, be in the forefront when it comes to developments in Greenland, because we are keen to develop, for example, as the minister said, you know, our mineral resources, for example. As the Prime Minister, I think yesterday said, you know, we are open for business as long as, you know, you respect and uphold, you know, the laws and regulations that we have adopted. So that's, I mean, the most important, you know, aspect for us. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
So, Michael, how do you see this in terms of the European Union? And obviously, we know China's One Belt, One Road strategy, which is like an important initiative with some perhaps thinking around of power game and so. But what are your thoughts in terms of the EU on this question?
Well, China is ever present everywhere. Obviously, you mentioned the Belt and Road, and of course the Polar Silk Road that they wanted to build into that. So, you know, you can't just hide from it. You have to confront it. We clearly have to do business with China. But we have very different views on many things. We would like to see China taking consistent international legal approaches to ocean governance, for example. The situation in the Arctic Ocean is very different from their perspective to in the South China Sea. We would like them to, obviously, we have very great differences with them on human rights and democracy. We also have concerns that they can live up to climate goals that they've set. Hopefully they will be able to do that and be more ambitious. But that is, I mean, going back to the mineral issue, we have seen since February how reliant Europe had become on gas from an unreliable partner. We want to avoid that in the future. So the idea of investment in minerals in Greenland and elsewhere is to increase our strategic autonomy so that we're actually not reliant on unreliable partners. We'd rather have local friendly partners for that. So that is why investment in these minerals is so important, I think, to secure a certain amount of future independence in our energy strategy.
So Tom, do the MEPs set up with this thinking set by our Arctic ambassador to the EU?
Absolutely. What we say is that China is a partner where possible, an economic partner for sure, is a strategic competitor where applicable or where it's necessary, and is indeed a systemic rival where unavoidable. And the question will be how China will develop itself in the years to come, how China will also develop its presence here in the years to come. If this is something purely economic, then we have to look at it. And then I think we, as Europeans in this multipolar world, we have our own approach towards sustainable socio-economic development that is very different from what the Russians or the Chinese think. But I do think that we need to keep looking at avenues for working together, based on international cooperation, based on establishing dialogue. And I think the very fact that Greenland is in the middle of all of this puts them into a very important position to see also from their side how they will approach these different important blocks in the world and how they would want to see them cooperate in their backyard, so to speak.
Excellent, thank you. So we have time for one or two more questions from the audience. Are there any? There we have a hand up in the back row, please. So can we have the microphone? Please kindly introduce yourself and who would like to address the question, please.
My name is Gert Mulvad. I'm from the Research Council here in Greenland. The West Nordic country, Norway, Faroe Island, Iceland and Greenland are a bloc outside EU. How do EU see that as a bloc to cooperate with, or do you prefer to cooperate with each country?
Thank you. Maybe that's for Michael to start.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, you are outside of the European Union, but you are closely associated with the European Union. It's interesting that you come from the research community because, of course, there is access that Norway, Iceland enjoys to Horizon, the Horizon program, for example, and also the Kingdom of Denmark too. So, you know, we see the widest possible cooperation as the way forward. We're like-minded countries. We may not be in the European Union, all of us, but we're all in the European Economic Area. And yeah, it's better to work together rather than work individually, I think.
Tom.
Yeah, two things I would like to add to that. I think there is an exercise for us to be done for having non-Arctic EU member states working together with Arctic countries more. My own country, Belgium, has a lot of scientific expertise in the Antarctic, but would want to bring this to the Arctic now. And I think there's definitely scope there for cooperation, for friendly cooperation. That is, I think, one element. Second element, I think as Europeans, we need to approach the Arctic more in an integral manner. One very practical example, I think, is the fact that within the European Parliament, there is no real parliamentary dialogue with parliamentarians from the Arctic. I would really want to make a plea here for an interparliamentary delegation for relations with the Arctic, so as to make sure that whatever is being said in the European Parliament indeed also applies to the countries of the Arctic and approach them as a group, so to say, more than approaching them, each of them individually.
Yeah, that type of dialogue might also take place in a informal manner, maybe here in the Arctic Circle as well. So are there any final questions from the audience, please? Yes, here we go, front row, please. Can we have the microphone in here for the front row, please? Coming over there, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jan Weber Johansen. I'm from Ettu. I was wondering if since we have good partnerships in terms of fisheries, and we also have it on the educational side, and now going into the green growth area, could a partnership agreement on critical minerals be considered?
Let's have very quick comments from each of you, and starting, for instance, from Michael, please.
I mean, where we are with our arrangement with Greenland has just been negotiated recently, so where we are is where we are. But as the Minister said, you are already part of the Critical Mineral Alliance, so you know there is definitely room for further cooperation. And as you are so interested in, you know, utilizing this resource, there is much work that we can do together. We have to make clear that the European Union is not a sort of does not have powers to grant licenses and so forth. We play a kind of facilitating, encouraging role. But then again, there's bodies such as the European Investment Bank and the Nordic Investment Bank that can also play a role in this, I think.
Tom.
From what I hear also from Belgium economic players is that there is definitely a real interest in establishing such a closer relationship, if I may put it that way. What I would want to see is that it happens on the basis of a sustainable development that is in dialogue also with the local communities, with the indigenous communities, and that it is not only focusing, let's say, on the product per se, but focusing on the broader infrastructure. I think about dredging, port building. There's a lot more that can be done around it, but that also is equally important, I would say, as the product itself.
Inuuteq, you have the final word.
Yeah, and I mean, with a huge focus from the EU on the Green Deal and and transitioning to renewable energy sources, and I think, I mean, there's a realization in the EU, that Greenland can play an important role in that, with the minerals that we have. But then again, as Michael alluded to, it's also a question of competences, because, and we know that from Greenland as well, very much, when we within the kingdom, the discussions that we have. But we wouldn't mind, actually, from a Greenlandic side, see a more ambitious kind of a EU focus on, how Greenland can play a part in, this transition. So we would very much, I think, welcome that.
Well, thank you very much, dear panelists, on your great remarks. I hear that there's a good tone of collaboration within the EU towards the Greenland developments. We heard the minister's remarks of importance of education, fisheries, also imposing the sanctions towards Russia's aggression, among some many other important things. So please join me in applauding the panel and wishing you a great continuation of the day.